Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick and welcome to Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening Woman. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. Who is the awakening woman? She's the woman who's seeking a greater possibility in her reality and looking for solutions. She knows being awakened is not a lofty ideal but a necessity. If she can transform herself, she can change the world. Her conversations will introduce you to talented women who will speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. They share their stories and explain how they're in service to the world. So let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. My guest on this week's Her Conversations is spiritual life coach and advocate for survivors of narcissistic and emotional abuse, Petra Van Deijl. After moving on from toxic relationships, she now offers coaching, assisting others to build confidence, courage, and thrive. During our conversation, we discuss why there seems to be a growing awareness of narcissism, what situations create a toxic personality, and how to offer support to people we may suspect are in abusive relationships. So as always, I begin by asking my guests, HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel at your most HER?
When I'm in that place of joy and peace and love, when you raise that vibration, that is when I feel most HER. Yeah, just vibrating on a very peaceful level. And it's usually when there's, when I'm listening, honoring that pristine part of myself, listening to what my body's telling me, listening to my feelings, that's when I feel at peace. And instead of being in a state of fear, which is what we so often do.
Perfect.
So that would definitely be it for me.
Fantastic, thank you. And Petra, what I always like to know about the women that I speak to on Her Conversations is just a little bit about how their life has brought them into the work that they're doing. And, the reason why I'm speaking to you today is, as much as you want to share, is like, what was the journey? What was the path? What brought you to be able to offer your gifts in the way that you do right now?
Right. Well, I was a very troubled teenager, a very difficult teenager, and not realizing at that point in time that I was really just looking to find myself, as all teenagers do. So I was angry at the world and angry at my family and just angry in general, and got into made a lot of bad decisions when I was a teenager. I got involved with the wrong crowd. I started using drugs, drinking alcohol in excess, and just on a path of destruction, really. And on the same path of destruction, I met my first boyfriend, moved in with him, and that just went to a whole different level where there was so much emotional and physical abuse involved. But a part of me didn't care because I thought, well, I didn't care for myself. That was the whole issue. I didn't care for myself enough to not tolerate an abusive relationship. So it took, wonderful parents, and I'm so blessed to have had such wonderful parents, or still have a wonderful mother, who saw what was going on objectively, even though I didn't see it, I didn't want to see it. And they helped me to have a higher vision, which again, I got very angry at. And I went on even further down that path of destruction. Yeah. But at some point, I realized there was a calling inside of me. And this is when, there's an inner voice inside of you, which keeps telling you, do things differently, change your perception of life, look at your situation differently, talk to yourself in a different way. And again, I blocked that out for the longest time until I had no choice anymore. I had to listen to it. And I knew there was something that my life had to have more purpose than what I was in, misusing drugs and alcohol and staying, tolerating an abusive relationship. I knew there was a higher purpose. So I think my journey of self-healing started when I was about 20, 21, and it's just been a continuum because I'm not there yet. I don't know anything really, and I think that's the beautiful thing of life is that you each year you get older, you just learn more and more and more, and you just realize how little you really do know. And I think it's just being open to that path of healing and taking on experiences and learning from them that just keeps me in that, or for the most part, keeps me in that state of a high vibrational frequency, being her. Yes.
Got it. And I think, what you say about getting older and learning more about yourself, it's not something that everyone's aware of, though. I think as I get older, I'm noticing a real divide in people get to a certain age and then it's like, oh my God, I'm getting older. And it's almost like this kind of crunch and hold down, whereas other people are running into it and embracing it. And it's always the people that know more that actually profess to know nothing at all, because you realize there's so much that you take a little step and then you realize, okay, not in this lifetime, or maybe 20 or 30 would I ever get it wrapped. But that's what makes it so beautiful.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the main reasons that I reached out to you was because of your work with and your knowledge around narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder. And it's something that I think I may have mentioned to you before that I was aware of maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It was really cropping up on Facebook, this kind of like narcissist empath relationship. And it just seemed to be very, very popular. And I didn't really kind of not buy into it, but I wasn't really following the trait so much as well. I just saw it as a thing, and it just felt like another, there's always like a new spiritual term that's kind of doing the rounds. So I didn't really delve into it. And it wasn't really until I examined where I was part of a dynamic where I had a narcissistic personality in my life, and actually when I woke up to that and realized that it'd been a family member that I'd endured this for, the entirety of my life, but there'd been a lot of confusion and things like that. And it was only until someone actually pointed out to me that said, oh, it sounds like my ex-husband, he's a narcissist, that I kind of went, oh, there's that word again, and then started to look at it. And I think initially it was just, I went on to, the fountain of all knowledge, Instagram, and I found an account there but it was one of the accounts where someone was just putting out a list of the traits, the traits that they have and the traits that you experience, and it was just literally like a checkbox, and I was like, oh my gosh, and there just seemed to be more and more people, or maybe because I became more and more aware of it, that were coming out and saying, I've been in this dynamic for years. It's been my parent, my sibling, my partner, my child even, or work colleagues. Yes. Why do you think there seems to be an awakening to this kind of trait right now? Do you think it's timely?
I think it's it's the fact that people somewhere within themselves realize that there is so much more to life than a dysfunctional or destructive relationship or family dynamic. And because they have this niggling realization, they go on a search. You start searching for answers, and if I look back to, say, my mother's generation, or maybe even, my generation growing up in the 70s and 80s, is that it was, if there was a very toxic family dynamic, or if there was trouble in the home, you didn't speak of that. You kept it indoors, you kept it under wraps, and you didn't tell your neighbors, you didn't tell other family members, and you just had to deal with what was going on in the family. So to some degree, we thought that this was just normal. When you don't know better, you just think it's a normal way of growing up. But I think in the last 20, just from my experience, 20, 25 years, is that people are on a search. Thank you to internet. We can just get onto a computer and we can type things in, and all this information is pulled up. And this has been a tremendous catalyst as well for people looking for answers to their situation, knowing inherently that something is wrong, but now we can actually find answers to what's going on. And there's a label that we can also attach to it. Whereas before, oh, well, he's just an abusive father, or she's just a very depressed mother. We can now find the label and look for the traits and putting this very huge puzzle together. So I think that, people are on a spiritual path. People want to know more. People are starting to think for themselves more. They are willing to look at their own thoughts, their own perspective on things. Whereas before, we just followed what the media told us. We just followed what our family dynamics told us. Just get on with it. Stop whining. Yeah. So I think that's where the shift is coming in, which is a wonderful thing. Yes.
Absolutely. So freeing. And what in your opinion, or in any knowledge or background that you have, what do you think creates a narcissist?
I would say, there is so much ancestral trauma that we don't give enough credit to. There is so much that has gone on in all the time that the world has existed. And trauma is something that is passed on through our DNA. It is passed on from generation to generation. And when you have that trauma within your body and you don't realize it yet, that is one aspect of it. But the other aspect is that if you look closely at which environment you have grown up in, how were you treated as a child? Were you heard? Were you understood? Were you loved unconditionally? I believe that all of these aspects, or lack of these aspects, contributes to narcissistic traits. And of course, when we're talking about the personality disorder, this goes a lot further, where you are then abusing the people around you. I believe it is in our DNA. We all have narcissistic traits. We need them to be able to function in life. But when it becomes a personality disorder is when you use those traits to destroy others, to hurt others. And, it may sound like a cliche, but hurt people do hurt other people. That is just the way it is. But it is also to take a good look at your environment. How is a narcissist raised? Are they given preference over the other children? Are they never taught right from wrong? It's all got to do with control, and there's so many different aspects that come into this. So I believe that we are all born with narcissistic traits, but given the environment is what then furthers it into the personality disorder that we speak of. So, and I do think that the term narcissism is sort of thrown around very loosely, especially, since that I'm in that dynamic every day and I work with people. We have to be very careful about just labeling everyone that way. Yes, toxic people. There are very many toxic people. So I prefer nowadays to say the person is toxic, because I cannot give a diagnosis. And I feel that someone needs to be diagnosed first before you can literally say, I'm dealing with a narcissist. But you can definitely realize what toxicity feels like, and how we can deal with that at a very personal level, how to set boundaries, how to love yourself more. Yes. So I hope that answered your question. I think I went down a different route there, Carol.
No, it's fine. It's fine. No, because I appreciate it's one of those things that, one, because we're still finding out about it so much, that it's, it's difficult to then say this is what causes it. But then also if it's within a environment, I think it depends. I mean, from my own personal experience, I'm looking at a sibling dynamic. So we both came from the same situation, yet one person goes one way, one person goes the other, and then it just becomes, So what causes one person to react a different way to the same container initially,
Right.
But then, certain things that if I'm kind of using my own experience, which basically is the only experience that I can use, is how somebody's emotional needs were maybe not met in a certain way, but overindulged is probably what I want to say. So I'm the kind of thing is I will go into my shell and kind of sit and read a book and do this, whereas the other sibling will scream and shout and want until they get their thing, and that behavior just perpetuates, and then 30-40 years later, when you're still faced with it, you're like, this person hasn't changed. Neither of us have changed really the dynamic in it, where you have one that's still like
absolutely
codependent on that thing until one decides that they're going to walk away from it. But then then the other things that I then started to notice about it is then how much of an effort they then make to kind of damage you for walking away, the effort that they go to actually smearing you, and you think if someone just walks away from you, let them walk, but it becomes almost their mission in life to literally destroy you. And the shock and hurt of that from the person who's kind of trying to move away from it. But also when you're trying to explain to other people what happens, because they present so beautifully to the world, it doesn't, it's difficult to have any support because no one's going to believe you. And like you say, in times gone past, behind closed doors, and when we present to the world everything's great. One thing I'd like to ask you again is, if you are a concerned friend or relative concerned about somebody that you think might be in some sort of dynamic where they're experiencing that in private, what things would you notice? What things can you say? How can you intervene on a supportive level? Obviously, you can't go bombarding because it's not an easy thing to do. But
no.
What thoughts do you have around that?
Yeah, I would say, again, this is speaking from my experience as I was involved in several narcissistic or toxic friendships, is that my healthy friends saw the dynamic. They saw how my behavior changed over time, where I became very secluded, very isolated, and I would only hang out with the toxic friends.
Right.
I started to talk like the toxic friends, do certain things that would not, they were just out of character. And a friend who really loves you will put it to you in a gentle way. But the thing is, we don't always hear it when we are in that abusive state, where we are being abused, and we walk around in a fog, really. We're numbed out. We don't always listen to the friend who really has our best interests at heart.
Yeah.
And there were two very wonderful friends that I've known for very many years, who are gratefully still in my life, who said to me, "You have changed. It seems that you are sort of in these friendships, in these toxic friendships, you have dimmed your light and you are not in the foreground anymore. You seem to be sort of in a corner, and we see that you are under some form of control." And of course, I got very angry because this is not the way I saw it. But these friends, thankfully, just stood by my side, were always there if I needed to talk, always left the door open for me.
Yeah.
And in turn, I was also, in hindsight, I felt that I was being abusive to these healthy friends by not wanting to take their calls, not meeting them as much, sort of making excuses for the toxic friendships, where they were, where my healthy friends called or confronted me with some things that had gone on and said that is not healthy. That is a toxic dynamic to be in. And I would make excuses for these toxic friends. So in turn, I was being abusive to my healthy friends. That was my feeling. And I did check with them when I got out of these toxic friendships and said, look, this is how I felt, is that I ignored you all. And I sort of I didn't want to interact with you anymore. They did not experience it this way. They simply felt that I was under so much control that I could not see a clearer picture. But they were always there, always had my back. And I think that is the most important thing, is that as a friend looking in, just always have your friends back. Maybe move to the background for a while, but let them know, whether that's verbally or, just by way of a text message, for example. Let them know that you have their back. Because when I fell hard, and these healthy friendships, they caught me in that fall and really nurtured me back to where I am today, thanks to two wonderful friends and a wonderful mother who saw the same thing happening, but did not get involved because I was not ready to see that level of toxicity at that time. And I needed to be in that for myself, to be able to take away very valuable lessons and then start working with victims of narcissistic abuse as well. If I hadn't gone through it, I would not be able to do this line of work. No.
It's a particular type of, the only word that comes to mind is mindfuckery, basically.
Yes, absolutely.
You can't even really explain what it is. If I think of, there's countless examples that I can bring to mind, but one example or kind of one vague example would be I'd just start having a conversation that I thought was like a very neutral conversation, and then somehow a word would be lifted out of that and the whole thing would spin and it would become this rage, and you'd be sitting there just confused as to, like, I thought I was as ambiguous as possible, and I would always,
Absolutely.
when I'd kind of know that I'd have to have an encounter with this person, would be like, right, I need to make sure that I am speaking in as clear a terms as everything, that this word can only ever mean one thing. And even still,
right,
if someone, you realize, because someone is so insecure in themselves, which is why they're looking for the attack or assuming that everything is an attack,
right,
that they will hear an attack even when you're just kind of saying something very general. It suddenly becomes very direct to them, and then it twists in such a way that you're
Absolutely.
just like, I just remember a lot of the time sitting feeling winded just by the, just the wind being taken out of my chest, just like sitting there just going, what the hell just happened? How did I always thought I was a clear communicator, and yet it just went. What other kind of things did you experience? Like, what kind of other games that they played, the mindfuckery that they did, the tricks that they used, that when you started to realize that this is not a normal encounter, this is not a normal relationship, I'm not feeling safe or good around this person?
Yes. Well, I think a very important thing that you just said, Carol, is I thought I was a clear communicator. And this is the thing that we undermine within ourselves, is that we don't give enough credit to ourselves for clear communication.
Yeah.
It's, the communication is always clear. And this is what happens when we're in abusive friendships or relationships, is that we then blame ourselves because we think we are not communicating clearly, when that is not the case at all. Because a toxic person will never communicate clearly. They don't have that insight. They don't take the time to look at themselves, to self-reflect and say, maybe there's something that I'm adding to this dynamic that is just not healthy. So this is a great example that you gave, is that, you say things in a certain way. This is what I did. I said things in a certain way. I communicated things, and they were completely taken out of context and twisted in such a way that I thought, when this had happened 30, 40, 50 times, I thought I was going crazy. I thought there was definitely something wrong with me. And it was, it went as far as the way I walked, the way I talked, that they had something to say about every single aspect of myself. Why do you walk that way? Why do you speak in that tone? Who do you think you are? There are so many different things. It is almost impossible to put it all into just one or two phrases. But it's the feeling. I think at the end of the day, the bottom line is, what feeling do you get when you are in these toxic dynamics? Is it a feeling of fear? 9 times out of 10 it is, that you walk around with this knot in your stomach. It's all fear-based. Am I walking the right way? Am I saying the right thing? Am I looking at them too long? Can I voice my opinion? Can I stress where my boundary is? All these things are values that will not be tolerated by a toxic person. So where you have integrity and where you have core values, this is how you know when these core values are then expressed by you and the toxic person just takes them all down. That is when you know that you are dealing with someone who is not wholesome, who is not healthy. So I would say that it's trusting your intuition. When you feel something is not right, when you realize that your words are being twisted, that is when those are huge red flags. And what do? We deny those feelings within ourselves. And we just sort of ignore our intuition, when that is the best way to go, is to follow that intuition. Because it always has your best interests at heart.
True.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. I really get that. And luckily, for me, it was just like a period of time where I actually spent a long period of time in their presence and just realizing this is the end of the road. But it's something that had been going on, all my life. And I was just not,
Yes.
I'm just thinking, well, stuff's happened, we've not had the easiest of lives, and maybe there's this. And, when you kind of like throw it off to certain things, and also when you try and communicate it to someone going, I just always, it never seems to work with this person. Why is it? No. Because they don't hear it, because then, their experience of that person is like, well, seems like an all right person, and they always speak so well of you, because the thing that they can do as well is present how caring, how much they care for you. One of the really good ones as well that is still circling around their family is they're concerned for my own mental health. So create, I think they call them the flying monkeys, that will make it impossible for you to go to your normal friends or family, the ones that they're able to reach, because it'll be like, do you know what, I'm really concerned about her because, she's this and she's that. And, because then they will come and they can look at you, because I can see the people, the ones that I will connect with that have had that conversation with that person where they're looking at me, heads to one side, just almost a little bit concerned. It's like, I'm not the one to be concerned about. But if they've been fed a story of and validated by certain things, because if you're standing on one side of the road, it always looks different from if you're on the other side, or if you're in the center of the actual action, So what I wanted to ask as well from you, what methods did you start to use in terms of walking away, building up your strength, healing, and, because when I think about my situation, it's like you're saying, you never really, because it happens over so long and there's so many micro encounters, they always still pop up even months later when you start to feel a little bit better. You're like, oh my God, that wasn't right, that wasn't cool, that, there's just tiny little things that you don't even realize that it was constant dripping of it. How do you start to turn that into becoming healthier, starting to separate yourself away, building yourself back up again, and recognizing it for what it is?
I think the first thing is acknowledging mental health issues. And this is true where, the PTSD, the depression, the anxiety all comes from narcissistic abuse, emotional abuse. And there's two sides to this, where the narcissist will say, or the toxic person will say, she has mental issues, And this is true, but they don't realize that it's coming from them. They are the ones that have caused it within us. And the other side to that is that they will then deflect, they will project all of their issues onto you. and then go around saying to people around you, she has mental health issues. And that's why she is not honoring our friendship or our relationship, because she's the one with the problem. Mm. So, I know in my case, I was told at some point by one of these toxic friends to go and talk to a psychologist. She says, because you have serious mental issues and you need to speak to a psychologist about this. And this is what I did. Only the psychologist said, well, take a sleeping pill and you'll be fine within a week. But this is where, I'm not saying all psychologists are like this, but it's when you're talking to a mental health professional, is that in most cases, they do not realize the impact that narcissistic abuse has on a person. They just don't realize that. They can look at the DSM and say, well, narcissistic abuse is someone without empathy and they have a very inflated ego, and that's it. They don't look at the side of the victim or the target. So it's acknowledging within yourself that you are going through an extreme amount of stress and not just push it under the rug. Acknowledge that fact, and then start to look for the right help that that resonates with you. I think that is one of the most important things. And to also, what often happens with targets of abuse is that when we leave a friendship or relationship, a toxic friendship or relationship or family dynamic, is that we have so much doubt within ourselves for months, for years on end. Then, we tend to give the toxic person, the abuser, the benefit of the doubt. And it's really about owning your own truth. I think that was a huge breakthrough for me, is that I needed to own my truth. I had been through so much with these friendships and with the abusive relationship that I first started just writing down my story. I wrote it in my journal. And as I was writing, I remembered, as you were saying, the micro situations, the little things that were said, the little things that were done, and how I felt. And I started writing this all down. And this is, I thought, this is my truth. You need to own that truth and not give the benefit of the doubt to the abuser. And then I knew I had to do something with it, because as you said, when you speak to family and friends around you, they don't get it. They don't get that level of abuse. So this is what took me to opening my camera, and I would just make videos in the beginning just for myself. I would speak, make the video, and then watch it back for myself to sort of gain clarity, to lift the fog. And at some point I thought, well, let me just put one video up on YouTube and see what happens. It was really, my intention was just to get my story out there, because I was hurting so much and I couldn't turn to anyone. Friends tried to encourage me, but they didn't really realize the amount of emotional pain that one goes through. So I think that is the most important thing, is telling your truth in whichever way. If it means writing, if it means making videos, if it means joining a local support group for emotional abuse, then do that. That's how you start to create the shift. And you find your footing again. Slowly but surely.
Thank you. No, I absolutely hear that, and like pretty much everything that you've said there as well is one of the reasons why I took the space away from the podcast, because I was going through like a massive what the hell just happened kind of, because it was so, I've never been so confused in my entire life. It's just it was like what went on, and it was just putting on. It's just just kind of allowing all those little moments to just kind of float up and just be like, what that happened, that, and like you said, just little things like, you remember you'd say something and there'd be a tut or a shrug or an eye roll, or just those little things that you'd that give you a little, they just kind of tap you on the heart and they don't feel good, but you let it go.
Yes,
you keep allowing those to build up, eventually you're closing down. And it was just taking time to, and like you said, being able to express it. And one thing that did a lot of healing for me was watching a lot of other people tell their story. That's how I found you.
Yes.
Being able to talk about it, and luckily I've created this platform for myself for so many different reasons, and it's healed me in so many different ways. But I know that your conversation is gonna, so many people are going to resonate with this as well, not even from just maybe a family relationship, romantic relationship, friendship, but also then on a wider scale within employment, you have these relationships.
Yes.
Within leadership, we have these relationships as well. I mean, we can very easily pinpoint, who the obvious ones are in our
Absolutely
right now. But then also as well, and if I kind of look back on the last 6-7 month period of my life, what has really come to the fore is all the toxic relationships have literally bubbled to the surface and had to release themselves. And the final one, the most recent one, has been my codependency on a spiritual relationship. And I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but this is something that has recently, I didn't even realize that I had that connection there.
Right.
And that's another thing where I've been like, but luckily when it was very clear to me going, oh, I can see the patterns there because I've just come out of that and I'm recognizing the patterns there. And then now I can kind of place it here and be like, this is the same thing, so it's, I don't know what was in my stars for the past 6 months. I might have to get someone to look at my chart and just see what was, because it's literally like a bubbling up of like anything that was kind of cruddy and sedimented just literally come to the surface. And it's been like, whoa. Have you ever had that experience where there's been a relationship in terms of you've gone to someone for spiritual healing, spiritual comfort?
Right.
That have you heard that before?
Yes. Yes. One of the things that I've also been through with one of the narcissistic friendships, a very spiritual woman, very much connected to a higher good. At least that's what she professed, and that she would always be on speaking terms with this higher good. She would speak to aliens. She would be tapped into the universal power and energy. And I just soaked this all up, because I thought, wow, this is someone that I can not so much relate to, but learn from. Because I knew that, I am spiritual myself. And I know that so much more of what happens within our system, what happens within ourselves, has a lot to do with the unseen, with the spiritual aspect of ourselves. And just listening to this woman talk, that's another trait of a narcissist, is that they know how to sell you a story.
Oh, gosh.
They know how to, they know exactly what to say to get you into their spiritual web. And especially when you are searching for answers in life, when you have all these questions, you will just be so vulnerable and open to whatever anyone has to offer you. And this is what a narcissist knows, is that when you are at your most vulnerable, that is when they can go in and mold you. And this is, yes, I learned a lot from this person, but there was always, as you say, that sort of niggling part where you just knew that things, they just didn't add up completely. And these people are the ones who have these huge following all over, huge spiritual centers, speak to masses of people. And there's a whole lot of control going on, and people do not even realize. They don't realize it. So this is something that, again, ties back into your core values.
Sure.
What is important to you in life? And it's okay to be vulnerable, but you also have to listen to your intuition. When someone does not feel right, when someone is trying to sell you on something that you want to go for, but you feel this niggling sensation, that's when you know you need to set a boundary. And sometimes we have to go through that process, as you yourself have been through with spiritual narcissism, to be able to vibrate higher.
Yeah.
You need to go through the low frequency in order to get to the higher frequency. So this is, in hindsight, I didn't realize it when I was going through it, but I grew up in a Christian home. We went to church twice a week. Looking back now, there was a very narcissistic dynamic there, where the preacher man, whatever he said is what was supposed to be done in his congregation.
Yeah.
He did not tolerate people speaking back to him. He did not tolerate other people's opinions. And he would say, well, if you cannot conform to the rules of the church, then, you're a sinner and you need to leave the church.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the conditioning that I went through for years as well. And at 16, I said, I'm not having any of that because it didn't feel right. It just didn't. I couldn't explain it, but I knew that it was not what he was preaching was not resonating with me. And he was using God, using God, using the Bible, using spirit to keep people under his control, not a higher purpose, but under his control. So yes, it's a very real thing. And, especially in this time where so many people are looking into the dynamics of spirituality, is that the narcissists, the toxic spiritual leaders, they know this. This is what they use against us. And there is so much of it going on. Everywhere where you turn, there's some spiritual center that's coming up. There's some new spiritual theory that people are going to use in order to heal themselves. And we just flock towards this.
Yeah.
But really, it's using your common sense as well and your spiritual intuition. Your intuition is always spiritual, always. So that's what we need to follow. Sorry, I'm very interested, Carol. What made you realize that this was not a healthy place to be in with regards to spiritual narcissism?
It was the way that, and I'm going to try, I'll keep it as vague as possible, but, anyone who knows me knows what I'm referring to, or it's not, if you can, it's there. But it was just the way that something was presented to me. And it wasn't so much the practice, and it was around a yoga practice and Kundalini yoga practice. And as with it just seems to be there are a lot of exposing of the whole Me Too, and a lot of the things are rooted in abuse and all the usual things that you get from any kind of narcissistic relationship as well, where you kind of challenge or bring a truth or a question to someone, where it kind of gets batted down or twisted, or the victim becomes the oppressor, or or you get gaslit on things, or you're just confused, or you're a lot of the time you're very scared to kind of, after a while, everyone polices everybody as well, so even though you've got those certain thoughts and you see things and you're like, but no one really says anything, because the majority of people around you going, but they're so amazing, they're so good, how could this happen? So it was because there was a recent event where, within the community that I'd been part of for coming on to 4 years now, that a book was released by someone who had experienced horrific abuse. And this was years ago. And anyone who's been through any kind of abuse, it's not always easy to just go, that happened yesterday, I'm going to tell my story today. People will sit on it for decades, or they may even take it to the grave, because it's not an easy thing to do. Because the one thing that you don't want to go through is then open up about what you've been through, because what's secondary, almost equally as painful, is not being believed. It hurts almost just as much, and this is what I experienced just recently with, coming out of a narcissistic abusive family dynamic, and then kind of expecting to have a conversation with a friend, and a friend shutting me down and not believing me. I'm like, that was a double blow. That was just like, what I couldn't even, that sent me reeling more than anything. So, but the with regards to the spiritual it was an opportunity. I kind of got swept into the wave of this because it was all about women. It was about uplifting women. It was like kind of like changing the patriarchal structure and moving and
Right.
uprising and women being the leaders going forward, and being a spiritual community and supporting each other. And like you said, out of that, there were certain things that I will take with me I loved the organization of it, the idea of the organization as it presented itself to me. I love the community. There are sisters that I've met in there that, some are still there, some are not. And that connection that was really pure, but we all went there because we all in our own way had a wound that drew us to this light, so that's what kind of drew us anyway. Exactly. But what really did it for me was when the way that this woman's story was shut down by another woman, as in, it's not true, we're not going to talk about it. And the way that you kind of gaslight people nowadays is online. You will block them on social media, you'll delete their comments, and this started happening. And that in itself was, one, I believed the woman. I'm like, why is someone going to talk about something that happened 30 or 40 years ago? Go to the trouble of writing a book. Books are not easy to write, so why go to the trouble of writing pages of lies? So it was just there was that, and then there was the way that the community in itself, or the people who'd built businesses around the practice, some were able to walk away from it. Some were like, well, I can separate the teacher from the abuse, the kind of the person who'd created this lineage. And then others were, I have to walk away from it. But then others just didn't want to hear anyone. And there's this kind of, maybe I don't have the spiritual intelligence to be able to have this neutral mind, then all of these phrases come out. To have this, to be able to have this kind of neutral mind, to be able to compartmentalize the person from their abuses and everything. And some people can come and go, it's your ego talking, it's your shadow self. We're all human. It's, we all do bad things. Yes, we all do bad things, but there's like, there's bad and there's evil, right? When you're causing systematic abuse, there's a level where I was just like, I'm sorry, I don't have the compartmentalization to go along and pretend that this is happening, or assume that this woman is just making up a story.
Right.
Just seeing the way that was handled, it just looked very much like this is someone who's narcissist playing the game, but on a bigger scale, because we have technology, like you say, we have technology, which means we've got information at the drop of a, at the tap of a button. But that also means that people can reach thousands, millions of people with their message, but also that means the truth can come at it at the same time, and how, you're going to battle that as well. But that's how, I hope I'm being clear about how that happened. But as painful as it was, it really woke me up to the fact that we don't need a middleman. We don't need a middleman / woman / guru / figure. Our relationship is a direct one. Our practice can be an amalgamation of all the different modalities, because I'm always dipping in and out of different practices and different things like that, because, I like that meditation, I like that thing, I like that teaching, I like the way that person brings something in. So the people that I'm drawn to now are presenting ideas as opposed to being a figurehead of something. It's, and also I have to forgive myself for not doing a deep enough due diligence on certain things, or not really following through the red flags that had been there countless times. And I just went, no, I don't know, so
no.
That's a little bit of my story.
That is a wonderful point. Yes, that is a great point, Carol, because as you say, we do not need a middle person.
Yeah.
We have a direct, especially when talking on spirituality, we have a direct line. We are spiritual beings, and so often we give away our power, and often it's done without intent, because we think someone knows better, someone can help us through this, when really it's about just listening to ourselves, having that direct contact, and tapping into our inner resources.
Yeah.
And it's great to learn from others, but don't base your everything on the other person. No.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
excellent story. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
like you say about, writing things down and everything like that. I've been writing a book for many years, and, I kind of put it out there like a year ago that if I didn't write it by the end of the year, I was going to, all the notes that I'd made up until that point, I was going to delete. I realized I have to, because like up until that point, I hadn't really gone through the lesson, and if anything, everything that her stands for me, that higher energetic resonance, I wasn't even anywhere near that without this like last experience of like, whew, we've really got to like take off what's holding us down. And if I look at all of those, the situations and the part I played, that codependent part that I played in all of those, was because I was clipping off a certain amount of myself in order to have a relationship with these people. If I couldn't talk about the things that I did in my podcast, I couldn't talk about, I had to keep so much of what I was about almost a secret, because if I brought it up, it would get slapped down. What kind of relationship is that? So it's been useful. It's been very useful.
Goodness, it's that is the absolute truth. Is it's going through detox, as you say. There was so much of yourself that you sort of kept hidden, that you thought maybe it's best not to talk about it because of the clapback, because of what people would say, think, do about you. That all has to do with the detox, and forgiveness. When you're going through detox, there is so much that bubbles to the surface, as you say, where it starts with one person, where you realize that person's malignant, toxic, all of that stuff. And then that's the start of the detox. And then all these other things are going to bubble to the surface. The friendships, the work relationships that you think, well, I'm experiencing the same with them. That's all part of it. And you can feel very alone in that as well, because you think, well, I'm losing everyone around me. But what you're really doing is making room for yourself to breathe, to tell your truth, and also making space for other people to enter your life who resonate at the same frequency. So forgiveness in that also plays a huge part. Self-forgiveness. We very often want to forgive others, but we forget about forgiving ourselves first. Very important aspect.
Out of all of it, that's a real big one, is personal forgiveness. And we you enter into a situation with the best of intentions because it looks good and it feels good, and also you always want to intrinsically believe that at the core everyone is good. They just went down a certain way, and like you say, if they get hurt to a certain level, their only way of operating in the world is just to lash out. But then there comes a point that's the way they're going to operate, but you don't have to be their whipping stick, and it becomes working on, like say, boundaries. And the first time you start putting boundaries down, it's with a tremble in your voice. It's not the easiest thing to have done, when you're always there and you're always taking it, when after a while you go, do you know what, this is we're not going to do that anymore. In fact, we're not going to. I'm
done. Yeah. No, absolutely. This is, it's honoring the pristine part of yourself, which is so often what we don't do. The boundaries need to be in place. You need to honor your feelings, honor that pristine part of yourself. This is what I've lived by for I would say the last 5 to 6 years. Is a great quote that the late Dr. Maya Angelou said in an interview somewhere, and I remember writing it down. I still have it here with me, where she says, there is a place within you that you must keep inviolate. You must keep it pristine and clean, so that nobody has the right to curse you or treat you badly, because that may be the place you go to when you meet God. And I thought, wow, this is what it is about. We so often honor the other person, make excuses for the other person to our own detriment. And it's about coming back into our own and honoring what we are feeling, what we are experiencing, what our thoughts are, and then putting those very healthy boundaries in place. That is also part of self-forgiving or forgiveness. Yes.
I love it. That's a perfect capsule to that side, and thank you so much as well, because such, it's been great to be able to speak this way about it, because it's not it's not a common thing that people are able to talk to on a level that but more there just needs to be more conversation, or even if someone can just listen in. And I know from my own experience, it was just watching YouTube videos and listening to other people just discuss like this, that it just was like, oh, this is a natural thing, that actually started to validate what I felt, what I knew I was feeling, but yeah, I was still denying the feelings in themselves. So, hopefully this conversation will be part of that for somebody else as well. So thank you for being part of it as well. I want to ask you the her conversations questions now. So the first one is,
yes, sure, go ahead.
What is the best piece of advice a woman has ever given to you?
There have been so many great pieces of advice, and I wish I had written them down every single time I heard a great piece. But I would say there's one that has always stuck with me, and it's one that my maternal grandmother gave to my mother, and my mother gave it to me, and I'm now giving it to my daughter, is know yourself. When you know who you are, there's nothing that anyone can do to make you doubt yourself, really. It's when we forget who we are, when we forget where we have come from, that we are this beautiful spiritual being, and that we get to conduct our lives the way we see fit. We base our values on integrity and great virtues and love, especially love. When you know that about yourself and when you own that, there's nothing anyone can do to really hurt you. So know who you are. I think that has been the best advice ever. And we lose track of ourselves along life's path. Yes, we do. We do a matter of craziness to, and we forget who we are. But it's about coming back to ourselves. Just the journey, Marianne Williamson wrote that book very many years ago, The Road Back to Love, I think it was called. And the road back to love is the road back to yourself. So that would have been the best advice that I've been given, but also the demonstration of love and kindness from all the women in my life. My mother, my grandmother, I don't know how many aunts, great friends who always have, their life is a demonstration. And I take certain pieces of their lives and think, wow, how did you do that? I can learn from that. So I love it when people demonstrate their authentic selves, because that just opens the road for so many other people to do the same. Yes.
Okay. Great. And what woman represents higher energetic resonance to you?
Just looking in my family, I would say my mother, bless her, she's 76 this year. Yes. Just going with the flow, taking life as it comes, just being a soft place to fall whenever her children have needed that. So I would say my mother, first of all. And if we look at public figures, I love Miss Oprah. Miss Oprah has been my second mother from the time I was, 8 or 9. Dr. Maya Angelou, I started reading her books when I was 10. Iyanla Van Zandt, another great spiritual teacher. I love her to bits. Yeah. So these would be women, her women. Yes.
Amazing. Yeah, no, they're so good. I don't know if you've caught the series and the recent series that Oprah's been doing. She's been doing a tour. She's been interviewing some amazing people. I was watching the one that she did with Gail yesterday. Her and Gail are like kind of sister friends as well, and there's some beautiful conversations on there as well. But she's definitely an amazing role model, and I think that's probably why she didn't actually have any physical children, because she's like mothered the world.
Oh, absolutely, I agree. Yes.
Yeah. She's yeah, definitely someone to take from and learn from on so many different levels, in terms of heart, in terms of business, in terms of just someone who's kind of like navigated their own background and sitting in a place where you know, if she can come from where she came from and do what she's done, then you know, we can fall within the parameters of that and still do amazing. You know, so
absolutely. Yeah. Yes. She teaches by example. She leads by example. You know, and that she's so relatable. And this is what we need in life, is people that we can relate to.
Yeah.
You know, not putting them on a pedestal, but them demonstrating their life and showing how, whenever there's obstacles or boundaries, this is what I have done, and maybe I can inspire you to do the same. Wonderful. Yes.
Fabulous. Yeah. And what are your favorite self-care rituals or practices?
I love journaling. I've journaled since I was tiny, since I could first write. That is my most favorite spiritual practice, is when something is worrying me or hurting me or that I cannot get clarity on, then I just become very quiet. I retreat and I just write. And whatever thoughts, doesn't even have to make sense. I just let it come through me and put it down onto paper. So that would be my most favorite. And I just love, you know, when I tend to set my alarm at 5 o'clock in the morning, when the world is still asleep and the house is still asleep, and I just sit in silence and meditate. Just listening to my body, listening to my thoughts. And it just sort of, it's checking in with myself in the morning to say, how are you feeling today? What is your intention for today? Even if it's just one intention. I think checking in is so important before the world wakes up, and also checking in with yourself constantly throughout the day. That would be a practice that is just, it comes natural, because I've been doing it for so long. And I feel if we don't check in with ourselves, then we don't know what next step to take. So those are two of my favorites. Absolutely.
Good ones. Yeah. Absolutely. So what's next for you? What have you got, any programs or anything that you're launching in the near future?
Not in the near future. I am looking for, towards, I would say, the end of the summer. There is an online course that I'm going to offer, Targets of Narcissistic Abuse, where we can come together online. There are teachings, there are videos, there's live communication, just on self-care. And self-care is so important when you're recovering from emotional or narcissistic abuse, is to learn how to set those boundaries, learn how to honor yourself, find out or discover what your core values are. You know, so it's living from your essence again, instead of living or basing your life on someone else's opinions and intentions. So that would be what I'm working towards. I'll be working on that the whole summer. So towards the end of the summer, that is what I would like to launch. And other than that, you know, I think something that I often forget is to be present at all times, in the present moment. We are so distracted by what goes on in life, is that we miss the tiny but also very important things around us. And whether that's interacting with our children or with our partners or with our friends, oftentimes we're so busy about what needs to be done tomorrow that we forget to be present in this moment. And that's the only moment we have.
Can you just let everyone know where we can find you online, like website, social media, address and everything?
Well, I'm on YouTube. Not so often these past couple of weeks, but I do have very many videos on YouTube about narcissistic abuse and emotional abuse. So you can find me on there, Petra Van Deijl and Narcissism, and you'll be able to find my channel. And of course, I'm on Instagram, also Petra Van Deijl. Facebook, not so much, but yes, I do write blogs there now and then. So those are the three platforms that you can find me on. And my website is also petravandale.com. Yes.
Perfect. So that's it. And, you know, that was just like, I knew it was going to be a fascinating conversation anyway as well today. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for, you know, answering the call, and thank you for coming and just sharing your wisdom and knowledge. And I just hope it opens up, you know, more awareness for people who are going through it, people who may be on the outside and maybe have had a friend or someone come to them and say this is happening. And even though they might not see, you know, evidence of it, the fact that someone has come to you with a sharing that, you know, this is a very, it's a very kind of like slippery, like I said, mindfuckery kind of way of someone that they're dealing with something, and it takes a lot of unpicking, and it's usually the most softest, and really, you know, even the most intelligent people can get pulled into this web of crazy, you know, and it takes a lot for them to get out. So just to, you know, so that they can hear the conversation, and if someone comes to them, just believe them, and you know, just let them speak without shutting them down. I think the most damaging thing that anyone can say to you when you're trying to explain to them is like, yeah, but they seem like a nice person, because that hurts probably more, I would say. You know, do you have any final words on that?
I couldn't agree with you more, Carol. That is the absolute truth. Trust what you're experiencing. Narcissistic abuse does not discriminate at all. And oftentimes people question their own intelligence and wonder, you know, they ridicule themselves and judge and shame themselves for not seeing the red flags. Yeah. But again, it does not discriminate. Don't forget that a narcissist is a very, very clever manipulator. Mm-hmm. So anyone can be manipulated into their web.
I just want to say thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Carol. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you for doing this work. It is so important, the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, to give women a voice and to give yourself a voice as well. You know, prioritize yourself in that as well.
Like I said, I'm learning so much, and, you know, it's just inspiring me to really pull this together. And now that I've come out of that spell, it's just feeling way stronger, way more determined to really like, I've been given this gift of this idea. Now I need to really just go forward with it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Keep moving forward, Carol, because you are doing an excellent job.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you to Petra for joining me on this episode of Her Conversations, and thank you for listening. You can find out more about me on my website, which is carolmaywhittick.com. That's CarolMaywhittick. You can follow me on Facebook under the same name, and also my Instagram and Twitter accounts are under Casmic. That's CAZMICK. Thank you again for listening, and enjoy your week, and speak to you again soon.